Welcome to the Love Beyond Limits podcast, where we celebrate love, intimacy, and everything in between. I am Ameenah Asante.
And I'm Kyla Black.
And together,
we'll explore the realms of relationships, sexuality, and queer experiences.
Ooh. Hello. How exciting. Good to be back in the space.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Today we get to chat about our individual coming out stories. This is a part 2 from our Journey to Queerness podcast that we did earlier, and happy to talk about our coming out stories as well as, some basic recommendations around coming out if that's a thing that you have not done and you're wanting to do. A lot to consider.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so last time we shared our journeys of queerness and our awarenesses and knowings and interests and desires and how that led us to where we are now. And when I was replaying that in my mind, I realized we didn't talk about how we necessarily came out in some formal way, and to whom and how, and so that does seem relevant and important as we are endeavoring to provide ideas and suggestions or guidance, right? So my coming out story started my senior year of college, which, if anyone remembers, that was when I really dove in to starting to date women. And at the time it was for science. But quickly became very comprehensive and real. And so the first person I remember dating, it was the first woman that I had real feelings for. And we dated for a few months. And I thought, I want to tell somebody. And so I told my sister, who was 5 years younger than me. And so at the time I was 21 and she was 16. And so she was in high school, and I told her that I started dating this girl, and she was super excited for me. And she's like, so are you a lesbian now? What does this mean? Do you still like guys? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a lesbian, and I think I still like guys, but not right now. I said, so we can say I'm bisexual. And she said, okay, great. And then she proceeded to tell me later that week how she told all her friends at school that her sister was a les because I was only half les, and she got a kick out of that. And so she was definitely my closest and safest person to start off with, and that followed by my dad. My parents are divorced, and I'm close with both of my parents. But my dad is generally a softer soul, and it's always been easier to talk about feelings and things that have felt vulnerable with him, at least at that time of life. And so I thought, okay, he seems like a next safe person. And so that fall of whatever year that was, 2000, I think. Yikes. It seems so long ago. I told him and my stepmom, and I knew she would be a safe person too because she was in theater world. I know she had a lot of gay male friends. I didn't know if she had gay female friends, but I knew there was at least one lesbian person in her world. And so I was like, okay, she has friends. She's going to be accepting. I wasn't really worried, but I wasn't totally confident either. I was just like, well, this is what's happening, because I'm very close with my family, and I would talk about dating all the time. And so they started to notice, oh, you haven't really talked about things lately. What's going on? And I said, actually, I have been dating someone, and her name is what her name was. And my dad was like, well, I mean, everyone has to explore what they need to explore, which is a very
grandpa thing to
reliable response from my dad. And my stepmom didn't miss a beat. Oh, that's so great. What's she like? Where's she from? What's her major? And it was super smooth. And I was so relieved to have a parent knowing, right? My friends at school knew, and that was all good. I was on the rugby team, and so, there were some gays floating around anyway, and so that was all good. But I was most nervous and scared to tell my mom. And my mom, who had been always super close with, told her all sorts of details about all sorts of things regularly. And so she noticed the most that I hadn't, by now we're into November, I've been in school for 3 months, and I've never mentioned anyone I was dating or interested in or crushing on. And she asked me about it when I had come home for some break. And I said, yeah, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of exploring, some people, but I don't know, I don't really have anything to report yet. And she was like, oh, okay, well, usually there's always someone. I was like, yes, there's always someone. But, I don't know. And I was super vague and didn't say much. And so then with my mom, I came home Thanksgiving of my senior year with my tongue pierced, not related to lesbian exploration, PS, separate, but she hated it and had a big reaction and said, what else aren't you telling me? What else are you doing that I don't know about? And I said, what do you mean? Me? What could you possibly mean? And she said, you're bi. And I was like, what? And I was like, she's like, well, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like you're doing all sorts of things that without telling me. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't say anything else about it. And a month later, this person I had been dating that I was really into ended our relationship and really just realized she wasn't ready to be with women in her life. And she went back to her boyfriend. Age-old story. Eye roll. Fine. My 20-year-old bisexual heart breaking. And so I was really sad. And I went home for winter break and we're chatting, my mom and I said, you know how you were asking me last month about dating and you made that comment about me being bi? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, let's just say I'm going to want to explore some things in life before I get married. And she's like, what does that mean? I was like, I'm going to want to have a girlfriend. And she said, you are bi. I knew it. And I was like, I don't know. And then she's like, what? And so she was actually not closed to it, although awkward. And I told her there had been someone I liked. And I told her what was going on. And it seemed okay. And so I considered that was a successful coming out. But what proceeded to happen soon thereafter was her never asking me about people I was dating for the rest of that year, followed by me coming home after graduating college and joining the rugby team where I lived and dating women exclusively for the rest of my life. Essentially since then. And she was so angry and so mean and awkward and got mad at me for all sorts of super trivial things. And I would call her out periodically, is this really what you're upset about? And I lived with her for a couple of years before I went to grad school. And I don't need to go into every detail of all of it, but, the crux was she seemed okay initially. And then when she realized that it wasn't just a phase or just something I needed to try out before I got married, like I initially had, promoted, that it really affected her. And she said really hurtful things to me. She told me that it was like a death she has to grieve. And our relationship was significantly affected in a really bad way for several years it wasn't until I was engaged to be married to the person I married, the woman I married, that she suddenly got on board. And she had gotten better throughout the years, but it was very gradual. So yeah, that was my coming out story. Thanks for listening.
Well, yeah, quite the tale, and I would say that mine, has a couple similarities, but mine is the other path. I have known since I was younger, since I was single digits, that I had this minor attraction to the same sex. And apparently, for all of my boyfriends, including my husband, that I let them know that I was bi, as I identified at the time. However, this wasn't public knowledge. And so I got married when I was 27. That lasted a decade. As I mentioned previously, unfulfilling marriage, very strained sexually. And it actually wasn't because it was with a man, it was because it was with my ex-husband, contrary to his belief. And that marriage ended due to significant infidelity on his part. He was heading off to go on a business trip, aka be with this other person. And before he left, knowing that this was going to be the end of us, because there's no way that I was going to just continue to go along with this infidelity, I told him, I said, well, while you're gone, I'm going to get a girlfriend and I'm going to fuck her with a on.
That allowed? Are we allowed to say that on this
We
one?
just did. We just did it. Maybe it gets bleeped out. I don't know.
You're so lucky that you don't blush. My face would be so red.
Blush for me, darling. And he just laughed. He's like, okay, like, yeah, have fun, whatever, whatever. And I'm like, great. Can't say that I didn't say anything in advance, right? So that night, so he left this from when I lived overseas. He left on his trip, and I downloaded an app and met my first girlfriend. And for coming out, like, it was a great, great first relationship. And I remember talking to my mother and my sister and basically saying, hey, my marriage is over and all of this is happening, just updating them on, what's going on. But then saying, I've met someone. And my sister's like, oh my God, amazing. Like, knowing how long my marriage had been over prior to this declaration. And then my mother was like, it kind of feels like it's too soon. And I'm like, no, it's not at all. And she was expressing a little bit more hesitation. And then I said, well, the person I met and that I'm dating is a woman. And they both got quiet. And then my sister was like, yes. And I was like, yes. And my mom just like chuckled. And it was just, I remember it being this kind of like celebratory, light moment. And I was really grateful for that. There also was like this edge of making mom uncomfortable that I also am a fan of.
Yes, I definitely partook in lots of making my mom uncomfortable and
Totally.
very in your face. You will get okay with this. This is what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the main family things. My parents were divorced also, so I think my dad found out at the same time that the rest of the world did. Like a couple years later, I realized that I had been dating non-men, and I hadn't made any kind of public announcement, so I should just do that. So I just made a very long Facebook post and really just talking about, I remember one part of the post was that, my queerness, or I'm not sure how I labeled it, but it's always been like this familiar dress in the back of my closet that was finally time for me to just take out and just wear it.
Of course, you had a really eloquent, poetic framework.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I remember it getting like the biggest reaction that I had of anything I had posted. So my friends globally were yays for that, and most of my family. I believe my stepmother was publicly a yay on that post. And then the next time I saw my dad was like, I love you regardless of anything. And it was really sweet. And the last person to really come on board was my brother, my older brother. And he's always been very kind and loving human being. However, the religion that he subscribes to definitely does not support the community. And, his thing is that he loves me, and that's what's important. And yeah, so I definitely see the way that he embraces me and my partners, and more recently You know, Kyla, she's been at family functions, Thanksgiving and the things, and really does treat me and my people with love and respect. And so I appreciate that. Um, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I think that's the extent of my story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a good trip.
I'm so glad for you. Truly. I
Well,
really am.
I think there's a difference, you know, when you're like coming out in this time. It's like there's also privilege with that,
Yes,
right?
that's true. That's true. Right, because you, especially after having been in, what you describe as the unfulfilling marriage, and
Hmm.
then your family being aware of that and really just wanting you to be happy and respected and loved in the way you want and deserve, at that point, even if they're like, oh, didn't see that coming necessarily, they're just so glad that your heart is where it wants to be.
Yeah,
And that's
totally.
definitely a different stage for you and for them,
Hmm.
right? And it's having me think too about even stages of coming out. And there are actually stages of coming out, which I have written down in a workbook somewhere that I don't have in front of me. So that
Yeah,
will be so
fun.
we can have lots of fun.
Yes. So we were talking about this the other night, and I just think it's so funny. Kyla starts singing like step by step, New Kids on the Block, and it was yeah, too funny, too good.
Yeah.
So you're
We'll
welcome.
save you from that, but you should know that that's in the works. No, it's not in the works at all. What? Okay, two thoughts. So one is around the initial coming out.
So this is for people that are considering coming out, or are we
This is
still
actually
talking
just
about?
a commentary on coming out, as it even relates to what we were just saying about the stages and ages during which we came out and how, right, where we were in our lives. But that I have found that when you are a not straight person, there's essentially a constant coming out. There's a constant coming out, particularly if you are straight presenting.
Mm,
Take that as you will, right? But if generally speaking, someone sees me walking down the street, particularly as a parent and I'm holding my child's hand, there's an immediate assumption that I am straight and I must have a husband at home that they're just not seeing. So, and particularly also, I happen to live in, a suburban community where while there are queer people and queer families, it's definitely majority heteronormative, right? And plenty of bisexual women married to men, but still them too, they're straight presenting. And so I find that there has been forever there's the initial coming out of telling the family and the friends and the people who don't know who that matter to me, and all the other people who don't necessarily matter to me is just anyone else I come across. It's going to grad school, it's going for jobs, it's meeting coworkers, it's being at any function and someone's asking me, are you in a relationship? And me not knowing where this person stands. Are you going to be an ally? You seem nice, you seem like a person who wouldn't care, but I don't actually know. And, if we look at that, let's say the early 2000s, things have changed, but now the pendulum is scarily swinging hard in the other direction again. And once again, I think coming out for people is going to be a more tentative choice, particularly if you're not out yet, but even more so now because the global and political rhetoric is very overtly anti-gay, anti-LGBT, super anti-trans. And so it doesn't feel like an environmentally safe place to be out and about in the same way that it was or could have been at different points. And so I still come out. I'm coming out all the time. I don't think about it as coming out
mm,
anymore in that
yeah.
language, but every time I meet a new parent at school and they see me and they're asking, "Oh, so what does your husband do?" Insert eye roll. Like seriously. I'm like, "Well, my ex-wife, like
Hmm.
let's just throw in all the things that you're assuming I'm married, you're assuming I'm married to a
Totally.
man, you're assuming all sorts of things, right?" And so it's not straight people's fault necessarily, but
Society.
it is. But it would still be nice if more people could just be mindful to not make the immediate assumption
Yeah.
and just use more neutral language. Do you have a partner? What's your partner's name?
Totally. Totally. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I am very femme presenting in everyday life.
Yes, you are. You're so beautiful.
Oh, thank you, baby.
I mean, you're beautiful in however you present, but
Thank you, darling. I'm blushing, I promise you, underneath the brown. And often I feel as though nobody would have queerness on my bingo card. Like it's not a thing whatsoever. And I remember like I was just at like a holiday, gay sports league event. And because I'm there by myself and only knowing a couple of people, I see a table full of like non-femme, women. I was like, let me go introduce myself to have it be known that even though I'm here and I want to participate, I'm actually queer. Like it's important for me to have people know that. And
yeah.
yeah, it requires just extra steps for me, and sometimes I just want a shirt.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I think, and this isn't a how to come out statement, but often people are coming out verbally, right? I am gay. I have a girlfriend. I am a lesbian. I am bisexual. I am pansexual, right? Where there's some declaration of identity. And then sometimes it's a t-shirt. Sometimes it's a hairstyle. Sometimes it's wearing something, right? A lot of times people will wear rainbow accessories, which we still can't assume that means they're gay because rainbows are for everybody. However, some people do wear it as almost like a sign, right? Like it's a sign, it's a symbol, it's a calling card of like we're in the same community, right? I have a female friend identifies cis female who identifies as bi and is married to a man. And when I met her, she had one side was super long hair and one side was totally shaved. And I asked her, I mean, I liked that. I was like, oh, I like your hairstyle. And she said, thanks. And she said part of it was that she is bi. And even though she's married to a man, for her, that was a way that she felt like would attract attention in some kind of subtle way that like, oh, I figure that like the queer people would kind of pick up on it. And she was right because
Yeah,
I eyed her and I was like, okay, there's
maybe.
something with this person that like, not in attraction, right? But as in like, I
Yeah.
feel a connection with this person, right? Or relatability. And
Yeah, it's tricky, like on the other side of it, like for me, I don't even think if I wore, rainbow stuff, people would like put two and two together. I think
no,
I'm
not at
I'm
all.
that.
I didn't know this about you when I met you, right? I mean, the first time I met Ameenah, can I say this?
Please, go for
The
it.
first time I met Amina, she was walking around this conference room with a mask, mind you. So there was a lot concealed as well, right? I didn't see her full face. I didn't, eye contact was a
Oh,
little.
COVID with an actual
Yes,
mask.
yes,
Okay.
right.
I thought
Like,
you were like mask presenting. I was like, huh?
oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. Sorry. Masked.
Yeah.
M-A-S. And high heels, right? Very like owning the room. And this very androgynous looking woman was walking behind her. And I definitely didn't think, oh, this person's gay. I thought, oh, she has gay friends. That's cool. But that was it, right? And then even at the end of the weekend, when you introduced yourself, I said, like, she just seems so sweet. Like, there was no gaydar alarms going off for me. Even when we had our first actual like Zoom meeting and chat, right? I remember wanting to share with you whatever was going on in my life, including, the challenges in my relationship with my wife. And I was like, can I tell this person that I have a wife? Right? Like, I'm assuming she's accepting. She had that gay friend.
But I'm still not sure.
Right? But I'm still not sure. Right? And I think obviously it all worked out for the best and here we are, but I think just on a word of assumptions, right, there's the part of we assume based on how we see people aesthetically what their identities
Yeah.
are, who
Totally.
they are, who they might be
Totally.
in relationships with. And also we can make assumptions about who will or won't be supportive
Yeah.
or an
Yeah.
ally, right? And I'd be interested in hearing more from you about this in terms of within your like ethnic world and community.
Hmm.
Because for me, at least, I like when I am meeting new people and talking to new people, I find that and like wrong as it may be, like if I'm talking to someone who's black, I am sometimes likelier to assume that there might be less acceptance,
Mm.
right? Or I might assume like the chances that this person is connected to church,
Yeah.
might be
It's real.
likelier than not,
That's
right?
totally real.
And I don't know what that means in terms of their beliefs, and so I'm not sure,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah.
Yeah. So I come from both sides where, being a black woman, I definitely have that awareness of the noticings of, what feels like or what can feel like hesitation, reservation around, accepting, non heteronormative relationships. And I've been with partners in spaces, and it's interesting. The majority of the partners I've been with publicly around the black community have been also Caucasian. Like when I dated the two non-men of color, it was, shorter term relationships. But anyway, and during those times, like I can see, especially older people having like some kind of reaction. So there's that piece. I'm, very aware, and it's still to this day pretty common, but it's getting better. I would say it's getting better. Also, there's the part of me that, just like I was saying with my mom, I really enjoy making people uncomfortable. I enjoy pushing the envelope. I enjoy like you're gonna get all of this, right? Like I'm not shrinking. And so it doesn't matter where I'm at, with, of course, there's, regard for like safety and what I need to do in order to make sure that I'm okay. If there's any kind of like threat, then, I'm not gonna just be tonguing my girlfriend down or something like that. But in general, I have purposely lived a life of like, maybe I'm the first that you've seen, and so here you
Hmm.
go. You're welcome. Learn. And that's been a joy. What I was gonna say about like also being very femme presenting is that it is really tricky because I don't really want to push myself on anyone, but I do want to have people know that like I do see you. And so I think I was sharing the time when I was in Australia and I was at the airport, and there was an androgynous woman that was sitting, like, let's say the next gate over, and she was like, super cute, and I was like checking her out. This was years ago, and she got so uncomfortable. And the story that I've made up about this interaction is that she just assumed that this femme presenting person is like passing judgment on her, and like there's just no way that she's in the community. But I like kept trying to like shift and like get her attention long enough so she could see that I was like smiling, but like even the smile might have seemed like I was making fun. Like it's just a whole mess. It's a whole mess. And so
I
we need
think
to,
you do have to wear a rainbow bracelet.
I mean, it's got to be bigger than a bracelet, but
Or, a little like female tattoo on your face.
something like we need to come up with the t-shirt line stat,
Or there
because
just needs to be some sort of universal like hand sign, right?
yeah.
Don't do it.
I'm not. It just floated by. It just floated. Oh my gosh. Any any thoughts on just some recommendations on
Yes,
coming
yes.
out?
Yes. So I suppose regardless of age, this is serious. Okay. Yes, regardless of age, having friends, having peers, just having allies, having known allies. And I think that these days there are ways to know who is in the camp of allies and not. right? And certainly in school settings for younger people, depends on your region. But I'm so grateful that there are infinite online communities now in ways that I don't even know if there were certainly when we were in middle school, there weren't. I mean, I guess there were AOL chat groups,
Not in middle school. Not
right? Maybe
when we
that
were
was
in middle school. That was definitely high
we
school.
are aging ourselves here.
It's all
Technology's
good.
gone so quickly. But online communities, right? And looking for, but even in terms of safety, that is also very, something to be cautious of because
Yeah.
there's a lot of non-truths out there and now AI and who knows what
Mm,
is what. But, they're, I would say, always looking for your most local, closest LGBTQ center, community center, exploring. There's a lot of peer groups, support groups, social activities, things like that. So just getting connected and plugged into local places. Certainly finding some reputable online communities that are valid and reliable and safe to be part of. I think part of the assessing safety, like you said, I mean, I think that if you were to have felt unsafe, then you wouldn't
yeah.
have the stance of I'm going to put it out there and you have
Right.
to see it and you get to see it and you're
Right.
welcome and I'm going to
Totally.
provoke discomfort, which generally I'm all for, right? Unless it's like, well, I don't know that I need to do that here, right? It reminds me of an
Hmm.
experience I had with my ex-wife. We were actually in Virginia Beach one time years ago and walking down the street and it's beach cultures, lots of tourists, this and that, but there's some person on a megaphone spouting some different Christian words and beliefs and values. And in New York City, when people do that, I don't pay it any mind. But for me, I'm from New York. Virginia's definitely the South. I know there's more South, but that was already very South for me. And I was like, oh God, and so I felt we were holding hands and I think we switched to going like arm in arm, which just looked more friendly. And there was a part of me that's like, oh, I want to make out in front of him. And then when we got closer, I was like, oh no, I don't. Let's just cross the street. And I got nervous. And I didn't really think this person was going to physically attack me or anything, but there was the part of me that wanted to say like, fuck that. I get to be who I am. I don't need to hide myself, and also I don't want to call attention to myself and then be outwardly discriminated against,
Hmm.
right?
Totally.
And so there is definitely a lot of assessment and noticing in terms of your environment. I think there's so much reading out there now. There's certainly, I never really go on Reddit, but Reddit is like such an awesome community for finding support for really anything you want to find support on. Books, articles, blogs, TikToks, whatever is available these days, which I still don't know. I think there's so many ways to find people like yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As we bring this to a close, I'm thinking of a friend who just shared how a coworker, basically her husband, all three of his children are gay. And all three of them basically came out what felt like abruptly to the husband. And the last one that just recently came out gave him an ultimatum like, you accept me? Like, you have a week to figure your shit
Mm.
out, basically.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the friend relaying this to me was like, isn't that crazy? And I was like, no, no, it is not.
Mm.
Like, I don't know these people. I'm not in their home. And I'm thinking about just various, ways in which we know our family and our friends.
Yeah.
And you know what's right for you. There's no
Right.
norm that you need to impose on, your friends and family and accepting you and you coming out. But for this particular set of siblings, like they knew what they needed to do for
Right.
themselves, number one, and for,
Hmm.
their father. And
Yeah.
maybe the dad would like toil about what to say and what to do. And they chose what they chose. And I love that. And I can only be, in support of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's safe to say there is a lot more to say. And I think that will be the case for pretty much everything we talk about because every time we start talking, my brain is super activated and
Totally.
the switchboard, right? And there's just some, I'm like, oh, and this, and I want to take about my client and about this and my in-laws and my, right? And just all these examples and memories and things that have gone well and things that haven't, and ways people have suffered and ways people have persevered, and stories are all over the map. And I think the bottom line, like you said, is really step one is connecting with your own truth. It's really coming out to yourself.
Totally. Makes all the difference in the world. And I literally went from a life of just like, I don't see the point of any of this to like this is living. This is living.
This is living.
Oh goodness. The life. Okay.
Feel like
So this has been fun. This has been a lot of fun.
it always is.
Always is. I hope this conversation is supporting you, that one person that is watching this at this moment, or the many people that are watching us. We're grateful that you're here and looking forward to future conversations. Also, love to know in the chat if there is a topic that you would like us to discuss. Happy to hear from you. And
Yes, please.
yeah, that would be great. So go ahead and put it in the comments. All right. Lots of love and see you soon. Love Beyond Limits.
Thanks for joining us on the Love Beyond Limits podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, please feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes.
Be sure to follow us and join us next time.
I do. I have to pay.
Okay, we gotta do it. Be sure to follow us and join us next time as we continue to break boundaries and celebrate love in all its forms.